Welcome to today's episode of Walk a Mile in Their Shoes. And today we are at the Ballpark at America First Square in South Jordan, Utah. And I am pleased to announce that today's episode will feature our own Jared Benware.
Hi, I'm Jared. I am here at the Ballpark at America First Square, one of my favorite places to be. I love baseball. I love other sports. I especially love running. I've been happily married to my beautiful bride for over 18 years. We have two wonderful boys. I've been a school psychologist for about 15 years now, and it's been incredible work. And I love reading life-changing books and watching thought-provoking movies. And I'm excited for you to walk a mile in my shoes today. Hey, Mike.
Hey, Jared. How you doing?
I'm doing very well. How are you,
Good to see you, my friend. I am excited. Here we are.
This is it.
One of our favorite places.
Yes.
Yeah.
I love this place.
Yeah, very appropriate for what we're doing today,
Yes.
I think.
I agree.
To be interviewing you in one of your favorite places. I'm very honored to do it and excited to do this.
Thank you.
For everybody.
Yeah, it's a kind of a reversal of roles that it's a little out of my comfort zone, but I'm glad to have the opportunity. It's been so neat to hear everyone else's experiences. So I thought, well, maybe I'll throw my experience in the
yeah.
as well.
I have a feeling there's a lot of people that want to hear your perspective from this side of things.
I hope so.
All right, let's get started.
Let's get going. Yeah.
Okay, so I thought, what was on my mind to start with is obviously with what you do for a living. And I guess we could cover that really quick, just in case there's anybody watching that is not clear on exactly what you do.
Yeah.
Let's start with that. And my first question with that is, what got you into that initially? If you can think back to when you first decided that that's something you wanted to do.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
What was it that was the catalyst for you wanting to get into this field? Maybe let's start there.
Yeah. School psychology specifically, pretty much anytime you talk to a school psychologist, they sort of stumble into the field specifically. So many people have no idea what a school psychologist is, that they exist. And so that was kind of how things were with me. Like I knew I wanted to do something in psychology, and even going back into high school, I kind of stumbled into it again, kind of a happy accident, if you will. I had summer's driver's ed, which freed up a space in my schedule my first year of high school. And so I was given my alternate, which was Intro to Psychology. And as I'm in that class, my first year of high school, I'm like, yeah, this resonates. This is for me. Like I need to do something in this area. And my family had, dealt with so much, mental illness and concerns that way. And so it just felt natural. And it was one of those things where I was so lucky where I didn't really have to doubt or wonder, oh, should I do this? I didn't change my major in college or anything. It was just high school. I took several psychology classes, and then starting with college, day one, that was it. I never looked back. But then when it came time to do graduate school, it was like, well, which branch do I want to go into? And I looked into school psychology and I'm like, wow, I've never really heard of this before. And I thought, well, that's where you make a difference. It's working with students or young people, youth. That's where you're going to make the difference. On top of everything else, it's so great because I have nights off, weekends off, holidays off, summers off, which is great because I value my family time so much. And so I'm able to be there with my family all the time, as opposed to getting home at 7 or 8 o'clock at night and barely seeing them. So that's kind of how I got into it in the first place. And so, and I've never looked back.
It's interesting what I hear you saying is this was your calling, right? Now,
Mm.
as you said it in your words, I backed into it,
Mm.
right? But what I'm hearing is it came to you, you listened to that, right? You were born to do this, right?
Yeah, totally.
And you
fair.
listen to that, just you kind of let it come to you, which,
Mhm.
I mean, talk about that a little bit. Just elaborate on that, because that might be good for people to hear too. Like, where they're trying to decide, what do I want to do? What's gonna help me feel fulfilled?
Yeah.
And I think that leads to a lot of the challenges that we have in our lives when we feel depressed and hopeless and unfulfilled.
Mhm.
And then we're trying to figure out, well, what do I do?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But in your story, you let that come to you,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
And it felt kind of natural,
Right.
right?
You use that word,
Mhm.
being fulfilled, and that's what it's all about. I do this type of work, and it is fulfilling, and it feels useful, and that's something that I sort of send out each day. I hope that I'm useful to somebody, and so I think that's kind of what guides me in that process, was being fulfilled and being useful, being helpful.
Yeah.
And so that's really kind of what got me on it.
That's fantastic. So now, this is why it's so great for us to be interviewing you, because you've been doing this for 15 years, right?
Yeah.
Worked with thousands of students, all different ages.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So let's talk about that. I think my first question would be, what are some of the things that you've seen that have been, with all of the different circumstances, you've probably seen it all, different circumstances, different challenges, different family situations, right?
Yeah.
What are some of the common denominators, just off the top of your head, that have really helped people, helped some of those students the most, that you go back to and you see it time and time again, that has the biggest impact in your mind?
I think knowing that there's supportive people out there. I've had my fair share of students who come to me who are almost weirded out because I'm so nice to them, and they've gone through much of their life without anyone being kind and supportive to them. And so when they see someone like me, it's like, what's the matter with you? And so, but once they can get past that and say, oh, there are good people in the world, there are people that are willing to help me, I'm going to accept that help. That's when you start to see the change, when people are ready to be helped and recognize that there is good in the world, and they can start to kind of turn away from those things that they've learned throughout their life about, hey, this world is cruel, because that's all they know, right? But once they can reteach or relearn themselves that, then that's when we start to see the progress and the change.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so once you create an environment where they feel safe, that's so foreign to some of these kids,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
That they have to be able to trust and feel worthy, trust in the environment that you're creating and you're a part of, and then feel worthy, right?
That's a big one. Feeling worthy, feeling valued, feeling worthy of love. So many people that I encounter struggle with that idea. They don't feel worthy of love. And so it's part of what I do to reshape that thinking. No, you do have value. You have worth. And that's hard. That's hard when you've gone years, in your early years of life, thinking that's not true. So, but it is possible to kind of reprogram that, so to speak.
Yeah. So we're kind of touching on this already, but where I was going to go next was some of the most common challenges, and we've already kind of started in on that. But to elaborate on that, what are some of the common core challenges? Because you have your surface level kind of symptoms, right? But then I'm sure you've identified that some basic root challenges that tend to be there a little more often, where that you see a little bit more commonly. What are some of those? What are some of the root issues?
Well, the schools that I've worked at a lot have been kind of lower in economic status, and so people from the get-go are just struggling to survive. Basic needs. They're struggling to find a place to live. We have so many students who are just transient, and where they're living with family members, or they're just living in shelters. We have a lot of students like that. And so it's just sort of surviving through some of those basic needs. And so from an early age, they're experiencing trauma because of those situations, and maybe their parents or guardians are just maxed out on their limits, and so they don't know quite how to take care of them. And so trauma is a big one. Of course, anxiety, and just dealing with just the stressors of daily challenges of high school, because it's so competitive, grades are so important. There's so much emphasis on college, and so there's just so much pressure there. And then just depression, sometimes we're kind of losing that human connection, which can lead to depression and symptoms like that. And so I encounter those things quite a bit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Can you give us a couple examples that just come to mind off the top of your head of anything that might be helpful for other people to hear with specific students that you've worked with, and maybe that's breakthroughs that really hit you, differently?
Yeah.
In things that you've worked through with students.
Yeah, that's a great question. And something that immediately pops in my head, that, and I think about this student from time to time, but there was this student that was referred to me about 10 years ago, and he had this form of muscular dystrophy. And so he had this real nice big wheelchair that he wheeled around in, and from what I remember, the life expectancy of that particular form was like late teens. Mm-hmm. And he was about 15, 16 years old. And so he was living on precious time. And so kind of my job for him, so to speak, was to kind of get his emotional house in order, if you will. And I don't feel like I had to do much, because he was so happy and just had a zest for life. Mm-hmm. And he, we would meet, and he'd tell me jokes, and we'd laugh together, and he was so just happy to be alive. And he would go to these camps with other kids that had this type of muscular dystrophy as a way of connection, and that was great. And he would tell me about these new friends that he would make, and then a week later he'd say that friend died. And this happened multiple times, this same scenario, and so he easily could have said, "Why me? Woe is me," but he never did. He just had this just love of life, and that completely flipped kind of the way I was thinking about things right then. He, instead of me helping him, he was helping me, and I'll never forget him for that. And then just about a couple weeks after that particular school year, he passed away, and we were able to celebrate his life. And I think about him from time to time, and just that love of life that he had. And that's something that really stood out to me, and something that I try and carry on in my own life.
Huh. That's a great story. And I'm sure you experience that a lot as a therapist, where it's never just one person helping the other, right?
Right.
Where there's a dialogue, where there's a connection, right? Yeah. And I bring that up because don't you feel like because you've experienced this so many times, mm-hmm. doing what you do?
Yeah.
That to have that connection is just an inherent need as human beings, mm-hmm. right?
Absolutely.
So that's probably a big source of the challenges for some of these kids is if they feel like they don't have that connection, mm-hmm. for whatever the circumstances, like you mentioned, maybe the family structure isn't there. Mm-hmm. They're having problems with friends at school, right? Mm-hmm. So what would you say to maybe a young person who's listening and they're feeling like that. Maybe the family dynamic isn't ideal. They don't have any friends. They feel like they don't have any friends. I think this is a big problem. Wouldn't you say that's one of the big ones? Like just feeling isolated, feeling unwanted, and feeling unsupported. So what would you say to somebody that's listening that feels that way and they feel like, I don't really have resources for that, I don't have friends, what can they do?
You know, that's a really wonderful thing about, especially like our high schools, is that we have so many clubs. And the reason for that is for those kids in mind. You know, they can connect with people with similar interests, and bam, they have somebody that they can connect with and befriend all of a sudden because they have those mutual interests. And so I think start there. You know, even developing positive relationships with the adults in life too. You know, teachers. You know, there's so many good teachers out there that I encounter who are so good at listening, so good at being available for students. And so develop some of those relationships too. You know, we talk a lot about online, you know, being online and having relationships there. And sometimes that, you know, oftentimes that gets sort of a bad rap, but that is a great way to make those connections from afar, right? You know, we're kind of more of a global community now, and you can get connected with people who have those similar interests online. You know, and I'm not saying that should be the end all be all, but it is a great tool for connection. And so there's a lot of avenues of connection for people, and I think that's important for people to realize that, hey, I may not have a friend right in front of me, but that doesn't mean they're not around me.
Yeah, you know, I'm glad you brought that up too. And here's another thing that I would add to that, as I hear you talking about that. When you were talking about the online part, one of the things I was thinking, and this is just from my personal experience, I'm more introverted. I'm not socially introverted completely, but I'm more a person that likes to process things alone. Yeah. So if I was going through depression, for example, when I was younger, if somebody had told me to join a group at school, that would not have resonated with me.
Right.
So I'm thinking in my mind, there's kids out there like that.
Absolutely.
Like they're not necessarily physically isolated just because they're depressed. They may be depressed and need connection, but not necessarily want to be in social groups. Right?
Exactly.
And you probably encountered that with people you've worked with.
Yep.
So then that's another benefit to the online suggestion that you're talking about, is that's a way to connect, right? Where you're not necessarily joining a social environment, but you can have connection on your terms, right? So you see that sometimes that's another dynamic, right? With their personality type. Yes, they're dealing with maybe feeling depressed and isolated, and they're having the same challenges. But one student may be more extroverted and need physical connection, whereas another may need a different type of connection, and distinguishing that's not right or wrong. Right?
Exactly.
Do you get into those types of discussions too with them and kind of distinguish that?
Yeah. We talk about all those different ways to connect, and so and I love that you said one way isn't right or wrong. You know, there's advantages to both the physical and the virtual. We can't just dismiss virtual because we think it's bad and horrible. Like, no, there's so much good that comes from that part of connecting with people.
Yeah, I just think that's an important point, because I can remember actually thinking to myself like that was mixed in with the depression, almost like there was something wrong with me wanting to be alone more. And like it was a problem that had to be fixed. And then I got older and I realized, no, that isn't a problem. That's something that I actually enjoy my alone time. And I work through things alone. So that it's not necessarily just because you're isolated that, right? Okay. Yeah. I was wondering if you could maybe share some personal things that you've overcome, personal challenges and things that you've had it happen in your life, or whether it's with the circumstances of your life, or maybe it was just you got hit with a bout of feeling unfulfilled and down, right? And what have you done for that has worked really well for you, and maybe even continue? What practices do you continue personally to help with that?
Well, I'll think back to a time that feels like a million years ago, but it was near the end of high school, and I really started developing. In hindsight, it was like, oh yeah, I developed some really serious symptoms of depression, and I never, in my own mind, I was 18. You kind of have that invincibility complex, and so I thought, oh, this will sort itself out. I'll be fine. Don't worry about it. And so it was just kind of like I was in a funk. Was basically the way I thought of it. But it just kept going and going and going. And I had a lot of plans in my mind. When you're 18 and you're on the end of high school, it's like, okay, I'm going to do this. And I'm going to this place, and I'm going to marry that girl and all that. And you have all these plans set up in your mind. Mm-hmm. And little by little, that depression just derailed all of those plans. And I was lost. It was really kind of like, I guess, an identity crisis of sorts. I even felt kind of like an outcast in some ways. And saying that out loud now, about 25 years later, it sounds irrational because I knew people loved me. I knew people cared about me. Mm-hmm. But that's what depression does. It removes all that rational thinking from your head, and you're stuck thinking irrationally. And so, I was dealing with this sort of identity loss, if you will, and it got really bad. And I was thinking about just calling it quits on everything. And unfortunately, I tried that a couple times. When that happens, anybody who's experienced something like that knows how draining that is and exhausting that is. And so I knew at that point, it was kind of like, well, I don't want to try that again, or at least not anytime soon. And so I felt even more stuck, like I had power over nothing at that point. But luckily, we kind of thought, well, let's change the scene a little bit. And so I moved up to Ogden, and I moved in with my aunt. She worked at the university at that time, and so she got me set up in school, got me on a part-time schedule. And she is just the kindest, most loving person I have ever known, and probably ever will know. She was just amazing. She took me in, no questions asked, no judgment, and just supported me. And so she was one of those people that helped keep me alive and keep me going. I did have, in that era of life, I did, a young lady entered my life at that point. And I loved her. We had a really strong, powerful, even intense connection with each other. And it felt so great to be able to feel and love again. And she was another one of those people that helped keep me alive, and gave me a reason to keep going. And we were both very young and both dealing with severe mental health issues, so we weren't together very long, and that's okay. There's no anger or bitterness about that, just a lot of love and gratitude that she was there at that vulnerable time in my life. And I was able to just keep going just long enough to realize that, hey, life is good. Life can be good. Life can be really beautiful. And I think about all the things I would have missed out on. I would have think about my incredible family, my beautiful wife, who I love, who has supported me through everything, my wonderful children, the career that I have. I would have missed out on all of that had I just ended things. But I guess the short answer to that question was, what helped me get through it was changing the scenery. And I tell that to students a lot. They may not be able to pick up and move like I did, but I tell them, change your routine. Do something different. Talk to somebody new you haven't talked to for a while. Switch it up. And then be around people that support you, that love you unconditionally. And doing those things will help lift you up, I think.
That's great. Thank you for sharing that as we come to the end here. I think what I'm hearing you say, this is so great coming from you too, because of your experience, and you've worked with so many kids. And I'm thinking to somebody watching this who maybe is in that place you described before you kept pushing through, before you were able to work your way out of it.
Yeah.
And if you think of some young student who's dealing with that watching this right now, I think my question was going to be, what would you advise to them? But I think you're answering that. And it means a lot, as I said, coming from you, because it's you just shared your own experience, but also you've worked with so many students. You've worked them through this. Yeah. So there's so much credibility to, you're not just saying something that sounds good in theory, right? Yeah. So I'm paraphrasing what you said and add to it in conclusion if there's any more, but you're saying, as simple as it sounds, just keep going. Just keep things. The depression is distorting your vision right now. Yeah. But if you just keep going, that you'll get that person that will come into your life. You'll get that inspiration, right? That's what you're saying.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I'm glad to be able to talk specifically about this, because really that's the number one reason why I started doing these interviews, is for that one person. I didn't want a mass audience or anything. I just wanted to reach out to that one person. And so, I know everybody's different. Every experience is different. And so I would say to that one person, you may feel down, but you're not out of the fight, okay? There's going to be kind of figurative voices, maybe even literal voices that tell you to stay down, to give up. It's not worth it. And I would say, don't give in to those voices, because like you said, I guarantee you there is somebody or something who needs you. And if they're not there now, they will be. And so if nothing else, live and stay around for that person or that thing that needs you. And they're going to carry you along until you realize that, hey, there are things worth going on for. And the great news that's been shared by so many people on these interviews is that you're not alone in the fight. There's counselors, therapists, teachers, neighbors, family members, friends. It doesn't matter. Just reach out. Start that process of getting help. And probably the most important thing I can share is that you are loved, you are valued, and you're needed. You have a place on this planet. And so everything else that's been said, that's the number one thing that I want to push from all this.
That's fantastic. And what I will add, coming from all of us, is that you are loved and valued, and you're a gift to this world. And thank you so much for who you are and what you do.